Well, welcome to another episode of Take Your Mountain. I'm feeling relaxed today according to Mick, so I'll try not to be so relaxed you fall asleep or I fall asleep. But I'm your host, Jason. We got our co-host,
Mick
Pickett. And today we're going to do little current events, talk about some of the things going on in the world today, specifically around budgeting and some of the hot topics, politics with budgeting as a nation, the Department of Government Efficiency or D.O.G.E, Elon and Trump and all that. And we're gonna do our best. We have I have strong opinions about all this stuff. But our goal today is to come at it with open-mindedness, open hand, and to share. Got some things on the personal side. We'll share just how that comes in. But really talk about these current events with an eye towards unity, with an eye towards information, with an eye towards health, and really, I think what everyone can agree to, which is we want a better country, we want a better place for our families, we want a better place to live. I think these are all things that we can agree on, and obviously there's many ways to get there, and there's differences of opinion, let's just say. But we wanted to kind of dive into some of these stickier topics and maybe share with hopefully leaves with, no matter who you are, an element of hope and excitement for what's coming. Well, it's here and is coming in greater measure in the future. So, Mick, before we started the show, you were starting to share a little bit about your own personal D.O.G.E team. Maybe share a little bit on what you're doing on the personal side when it comes to budgeting and things like that.
All right. I just turned 40 in November. And
congrats.
Thanks.
Welcome to the club.
Just had a unique relationship with money throughout my whole life, which I've shared on previous episodes and such. And for whatever reason, like an actual strict framework of a budget, I just always kind of kept it at arm's length or thought.
Just curious, did you ever do the Dave Ramsey thing?
No.
Okay.
I know all about Dave Ramsey, but I think I had some weird justification of I want to control my own money. I want to be able to give where I want to give. I don't want to have it be this systematic thing.
Yeah.
But I think there was too much arrogance there or ignorance. I think there's a way to have a good framework and also still have those things.
Yeah.
But it's never, with business, I've always just had enough coming in where it's okay and I can get by.
It clears.
Yeah. And there's enough going on with little kids and stuff that it's never made it to the top of the priority list.
Yeah.
And something that the Lord has been doing in my life, just trying to progress in maturity these last several years. Finances have finally started to he's really got my attention. Specifically in about almost 2 years ago, I had a good breakthrough where I wasn't chasing these big gains anymore. But these last 2 years, I've actually been when the money comes in, putting it where it's supposed to go. Kind of in my mind. Yeah. But still never put on an actual spreadsheet budget.
Sure.
And so in the last even 2 weeks ago, I was just starting to see I was supposed to have several deals that I thought were going to close in December. And they all just kind of got pushed to maybe the May now. And so it's you're expecting to get it effectively about
still in the hopper, but pulled your cash flow out.
Yeah, effectively 20% of my income I was expecting to have got pushed out a few months. And so now, in the Lord's kindness, he's just, even through my brother who's got a lot of experience in this, he put the budget on my radar again. And it was just the right circumstances where it actually landed of this could be worthwhile. And the funniest thing is once we dove into it, which is only a week ago, I was I love this. Because it's it's gamifying efficiency and maximizing what to do. And I'm what have I been doing? And so then it started to click of was the enemy been sabotaging this in my whole life? Because this is something that I'm actually pretty good at.
Pretty uniquely talented to do, yeah.
And so I've been itemizing and going through all the statements of any credit cards or bank statements or whatever and just getting, 50, 60 items on a list and monthly stuff. And I'm enjoying it. And seeing the obvious gaping holes.
Sure. Yeah. The quick wins.
And my wife and I just kind of different backgrounds, but kind of similar where we kind of neither of us were calling each other out on it.
Yeah.
Maybe
Yeah.
just not unhealthy, but not, I don't know the right word, codependency or something in some weird way. But now it's out in the open. Now she's like, I love it too. And so it's like we're really on the same page.
That's great.
So it's been super cool to essentially kind of, we're kind of doing a parallel to what DOGE is doing in the US government, where it's like we're putting everything on the table as if everything can be removed.
Mm-hmm.
And we need it all out there in the open.
Yeah.
And effectively it's all gone in my mind. And then we're going to put back the ones that matter.
Oh, so good.
Which is like, it's funny, that parallel didn't even hit me till like a couple minutes ago when we were talking. But it's like, that's effectively what the government is doing now.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't really know what is bad and what's good. And like we were talking about the wheat and the chaff parable. There's a field growing. There's tons of good things growing out of it. There's tons of good fruit and good harvest. But there's a whole bunch of wheat in there too. And it's all mixed together. And I don't know what's good and what's bad. So I need to take all of it out and set it over here and then examine and create processes to put in the good ones again.
Yeah. That's so good.
So that's quick up.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts came to mind when you were talking. And that's not assuming in your household you don't have like a deep state in there, like it's all you, right? That's a whole other subject in there. But one thing you said earlier that resonated with me was like Dave Ramsey and budgeting. I was an econ finance major in college. So it's like I know about money, you know? And so when Dave Ramsey was started off for, I think it was like 16 or 17 years ago at our church, it was kind of like, what do I need to do this for? And then I felt like the Lord being like, hey, you should do it anyway, you know? And like, you think you're so advanced. Well, what are you advanced on? The fact that you trade a stock or something? Great. But what are you going to do, assuming you don't screw that up? What are you going to do with the money you make? And so I felt like it was a step of, I guess, humility to be like, I don't know everything, weird enough. And what I learned from that, Dave Rand, by the way, great class. It's not the end all be all of all the personal finance, but it's pretty good best practices. A lot. I don't agree with everything he has to say, but it's really good best practices. And part of why that is if you think about it less about knowledge, more about behavior. If there is anywhere I differ is if that's a 101, 201, there is probably a 301, 401 where you can, I'll say this very carefully, you can bend some of his rules if you've mastered 101, 201. It's a lot of that has to do with business debt and things like that. He's very low on debt. Hopefully, this is a whole nother subject, but hopefully in the economy we're moving into, you'll be able to make enough money. You don't need as much debt. Anyway, the point being, Dave Ramsey was huge on behavior. Like, all of us want to do, it's like everyone knows you should eat vitamins and you should eat well. How many people do? It takes discipline, it takes thought, it takes intentionality. And he helps teach that in a very systematic way. So that's a quick thing on Dave Ramsey came to mind. Then another story came to mind. Fast forward, we had a small business, and again, in a government, you're trying to come up with a budget with a bunch of other people. That's really hard. Let's just start with the simplest level, like you and I as households. And in this case, we had a small business, and it was amazing to me. We bought this business, inherited a lot of structure, and had plenty of other operational things to deal with right off the bat. But eventually, I don't know whether it was 12 months in or something like that. I was like, all right, we need to really look at what are we doing? What's our expense structure? So let's pull a P&L. What's a P&L? For most people, some people don't even know that. Profit and loss. And for what it's worth, ever since then, by the way, just real quick on the Dave Ramsey, and we've had a personal QuickBooks file for our family. So ever since then, and before I get into the small business, it was this idea of coming up with ratios. And what was really pressed into me at the time was no matter $1, $10, $100, $1,000, we operate from ratios. it doesn't. That's why it's important to tithe when you have $0. And if you think when you make some money you're going to start tithing, bull crap. You will follow the exact same thermostat or ratios that you always have. Whatever you're used to spending, 30%, 100%, 110% of your money, you'll do that. That's also probably why the Lord's having you look at this stuff. If I'm going to bless you, whatever you're doing today, expect that's going to continue, but for a catalyst, right? And just like weight loss or anything, if you have a new catalyst, you have to lock it in, so to speak, over like 5+ years before it's real, right? Anyone can lose weight for like 2 seconds. How many people live a lifestyle of weight, healthy? So ratios, that's like, and having those minimum ratios, like tithing, that's always 10%. It's kind of like your minimum, and then you work up from there. And it's only done through, it's only locked in through practice, and in order to practice, you need visibility. And if you're not tracking it, then it's like, what did we do last year, honey? We gave X amount of dollars. Okay, what was that relative to our total income? That takes some math. Did we write that down, right? And then what's our goals for this year, so on and so forth. And by the way, we don't track this super hard anymore, but because it's been so indoctrinated over such a period of time that you kind of know if we gave this amount and their income's here, that's what it is. And I do have spreadsheets to track that stuff. But anyway, when we had this business, I was amazed the first go around, 80-20, 80-20, 80-20. This is my business. I have every incentive to save a buck, right? But we went through, it's amazing how many things are plastic, how many things you can change. Forget even structuring employees and things like that, but just the hard costs of your business. I can't remember. I think our goal is like make $40,000 a month of profit. Now he had other expenses around that. I'm giving real numbers just to give you real numbers. And between our phone systems, we had multiple phone systems doing different things. Like, I don't even remember all the things, but I was able to consolidate those, and like that restructuring saved like $6,000 a month. Like relative to our net profit, like that's a huge save. That was just one thing. I think when I went through, it was close to $18,000 to $20,000 a month of costs. I probably still have a spreadsheet somewhere. But until you shine the light on it, you don't know it's there. And then, okay, so I squeezed a lemon. Man, we squeezed that thing hard. Like we were fighting for our lives at that time. So I was like, we got to save every penny. A year later, 2 years later, whatever it was, I just remember going back through again. It's like, what could we find now? Surely it's my business. Like, and we didn't find 18, but we found another 2, 3, 4,000. And the personal side, it's the subscription you signed up for, you don't even remember you have, right? That's all part of good stewardship, right? To remember, hey, if you're using it, use it. That's fine. If you don't have it, don't pay for it, right? But I was just amazed. I think we did that 3 times before I really felt like, okay. But for a big change in our business, we're good for a little while. We did like 3 times. So 80-20, 80-20, 80-20. If you're familiar with the Pareto principle, sanctification, lots of things follow this, but like get the 20% effort, gets 80% result. A little bit of work, find the huge gaping holes, get the quick wins, get your, not serotonin, but dopamine up, gamify it, feel good. That's the whole idea with Dave Ramsey and crushing debt and all that stuff. Then let that settle, and I call it consolidating. Like you lock it in, and then go through again, 80% again. If you do that 3 times, I think you're in the 99th percentile or something like that. 80% of the last 20, that's another 16. So that gets you to 96th percentile. If you do 80-20 twice, it gets you the 96th percentile. Then you do it again, then you're in the 99th percentile. Anyway, I was amazed at that. And then, so I guess the cool thing when coming a little bit back to the D.O.G.E and stuff, When I picture the government, and I know my own experience, I'm governing this by myself. Like I don't have anyone to talk to make any decisions. So therefore, the maximum incentive to do it with the least amount of resistance. Now you take a government institution, which is influenced by, in the city case, city council, mayor, all this crap. I just know without even looking at the books how effed up they are, right? Like, because I have this real world experience to fall back on. So the idea of like taking that out, and just like you said, it's like, well, what would need to be done? Well, you need to like defund everything. Step one, defund everything. Step two, what do we spend on? What's the heart and the lungs? Everything out to the tiniest capillary at your tips. And then refund according to that. Well, that's where you get into the deep state and all that stuff, because when it's just you have every incentive, you get all the benefit. But if someone else, like you had all these vampire leeches on your personal P&L, like, oh, I'm getting defunded. Oh, I mean, everyone's voice is going to be this cacophony of all these demons being extricated, right? I mean, that's actually closer to what's happening. Because there's all these like little vampires that have their tongues into you. So when you say, let's defund everything, it's like, what are you so loud about? Why don't you just be quiet for a second while we do what's good for ourselves and for our families and for our communities? I mean, because when you look at the goals of a Doge, what are they trying to do? Get a better bang for your tax dollar? Does that seem like a reasonable place to start, right? So who's squawking? What are you squawking about? So anyway, I think that there's a lot of cool parallels between what you're feeling on the personal level, what we're doing as a government, because I do think there's a lot of resources headed our way. Like if we're successful with some of these policies, even just tax policy alone, not to mention some of the other cool things I think in the works on the investment side, but there's a lot of resources already flowing and will continue to flow, and we need to have the right construct to build that from, because you can't build a house off a weak foundation, right?
Yeah, it's essentially a reckoning. It's hard to keep your love on towards the situation, because you're talking about the vampires and the leeches and stuff, and it's like that's for sure out there in a lot of it.
Yeah.
But there's other like phenomenal organizations that are getting the screws put to them too. I was talking to one, this organization I've never heard of. It's called Mad Dads. You heard of that?
No.
These are some dads that were just fed up with like the way that they're either their sons or they were like, ex gangbangers, or they were in prison, and they were just fed up with it. So they got, it's a lot of Christians now.
Okay.
And they just started patrolling the streets. Like they go out and try to bring hope and life to people in the city. So now they're all across the nation.
Okay.
And they go, like even in Minneapolis, they have like 2 or 3 guys out in 5 different parts of the city that go out from like 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. every night.
Yeah.
And wearing bright shirts and like de-escalating situations in the city.
Cool.
And it's like that's...
Where were they getting their funding from?
I don't know. I don't know the backstory.
But they got defunded along with everything.
They're not defunded. They're not defunded. But like part of their organization, I think, gets defunded, and some of it doesn't. I don't know how it does. I'm just saying there's real people that are like huge hearts that are out there doing things that they want, that not for their own benefit.
Yeah.
And they're really experiencing like the screws.
Sure.
So it's going to be a really interesting time, because people are dealing with real painful. The leeches get exposed, but the other people suffer from it too. It's just going to be a really challenging time, because it's easy if you have your needs met. You talk about the hierarchy a lot, of needs. It's easy to say, this is good. Just that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
And from like let's say a wisdom stewardship perspective, it's like, well, there's clearly a bunch of open holes in the budget, Department of Education, whatever there is. And it's like, well, we got to just clean it up.
Yeah.
And so let's just remove it all, and then we'll take our time. But it's like in the meantime, year, 2 years, whatever, there's like millions of people experiencing like real pain, people that aren't leeches and aren't vampires and were like really devoted their lives to helping in those areas.
Yeah.
And they are legitimately like, what am I going to do for work now?
Yeah.
So not just ignoring that.
Yeah.
Trump's philosophy and their whole team is just like, this is the best way.
Yep.
A lot of people aren't going to agree with this. A lot of people agree with D.O.G.E, what they're doing in general, but they think in their minds that there's some better way of doing it.
Yeah.
Trump has just decided that there isn't a better way.
Right.
And in your 4 years that you get.
Well, it's actually 2. That's the other thing.
Oh, right.
People, it's 4. It hopefully is fully 4. But you have 2 years to hit the ground running and do all this stuff.
Yeah.
And the idea, like using your personal example, if you pause all expenditure, well, that's kind of like pausing the blood in your body, right? Like, how often can you go without blood? Not long. But it's the idea that, given how junked up everything is and how aggressive, there is a implied decision in their leadership decision that this needs to happen very aggressively. Like the patient is close to death. Therefore, we got to get them in the OR, rip everything out. Probably gonna be on life support for some period of time, but like we need to get the bleeding stopped and then go back through and turn back on all the organs that are not only necessary, but all the way to the capillary of a properly balanced, healthy body, which would include hopefully like organizations like the one you're talking about. But in the short term, certainly it's disruptive. The good thing is on from what I understand on the pay, that like 8 months is kind of like the standard offer. So be a lot of labor hitting the workforce. Based on how much remote work, it seems like it could be fairly decentralized, heavily concentrated, obviously, in Washington, D.C. I don't know if you saw the real estate report, like all the houses popping up for sale. But it's kind of like, as a leader, you have to hold all these things in balance. And maybe because I've had to manage crazy situations, sometimes you're just like, yeah, friggin' sorry, but not sorry, because this, on balance, this will lead to a very good thing. And then you do your best. Like 8 months severance, like could it be better? Certainly. Could it be? You're not out of a paycheck immediately. Does it create uncertainty knowing where you're going to go next? Absolutely. In the case of a nonprofit or something like that, they could potentially be defunded like that, and that's hopefully if it's a legitimate cause, that there's a reasonably quick path to reconnecting to the body, maybe at a lesser level, which might be healthy. But the amount of like just gross negligence and waste in order to get that out, you kind of need to force the issue.
Yeah, and a lot of this is huge, zoomed out things of your whole worldview on where the United States is heading, and so you have all these groups that are all funded, and you're kind of catering to a lot of people's feelings, and whoever's the loudest gets the funding, and you just have to look at the fruit of what's existing. And I think that the hard part is for like the person who's struggling paycheck to paycheck, it's hard for them to understand, or not I shouldn't say hard for them to understand. It doesn't, like the debt clock, that's just going up. It's hard for them to compute like I don't care about the debt clock. I have to get this money coming in.
Yeah.
So it's difficult for like a leader to come in and say, I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. And I wish we'd see more of that out of the Trump team.
Sure.
Of like, this is the hard decision to do.
Yeah.
Instead of saying this is simple or whatever, and this is obvious. It's like, this is hard, but this is like not saying Trump is like this good dad, but it's like, it's essentially like a dad in a home saying, this is the tough choice for us, but this is the right choice, and it's going to freaking suck.
Yeah.
But it's right long term.
Yeah.
Whether you agree with that philosophy or not, that's what I believe they believe.
Yeah.
And that hurts. And to not minimize the pain that that's causing, but it's like for the overall good, to stop the codependency and to stop like the feeding the bad habits and things of the economy. And it's like, I don't know. I look at it as it's tough choices being made that they believe are the right ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Do you have any anecdotes, at least from on the wage earner side, like of people being impacted aside from the example you shared earlier?
You mean like just other people,
Like
other stories?
who would be immediately negatively impacted?
I don't think any. I think the main thing is fear right now. I think people
Yeah.
are just getting. So I was just talking to a friend that his wife works in some sort of educational grant system,
Uh-huh.
and it's like they just have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah.
Sometime in the next, they think their job is safe for the next 6 to 8 months, but they literally don't know.
Okay.
And so everyone's like scrambling of like how valuable are my skills for other jobs just in case we get axed tomorrow.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because in a business that's actually good because you're incentivizing people to actually produce value and merit like they're talking
It's
about.
so there's both sides of that coin. It's like, yep, I get the uncertainty. But the idea that like 30 days ago people weren't thinking that is part of like lending to why we're in the position we're in. But you can't get skinnier without cutting some fat. As an economist, you even in the short medium term, what that effectively means is, well, Elon used the example like he found out about the mountain that had like all of the retirement papers. You hear about this?
Mm-hmm.
The mine.
So, like the mine, literally, the elevator, speed of the elevator at this deep underground limestone mine where they store paper copies of everything is limiting the amount of people that can retire on a monthly basis, which is, and apparently they attempted to digitize it and abandoned the effort, which actually, now that I think about it, in our small business, digitizing was one of the meaningful ways we saved a bunch of cost. But his point is like, okay, there's 700 people running the mine or something, like 1,000 people. And that's a small amount of people. But if literally they did almost anything for the economy outside of parking themselves in a hole all day long, how that flows through to the rest of the people is massive, especially if you take, okay, that's just one pocket of 1,000 people, all these other workers. When you get into what actually matters to the average wage earner, which is your standard of living, how many more goods and services at the same cost or less will now be produced by that labor that otherwise is completely, I think I heard a number like 40% of the US works in some sort of government capacity, which is kind of mind-boggling actually. But that, actually Trump probably could do a lot better of affirming some of the emotion side of it. But he did have that tweet one day that was like, we're going to be doing some things. Might shake things up for a little while, but maybe it won't actually, because you're going to be cutting this, adding this. Is it going to be a perfect swap this out for this? Like, probably not. Is it going to be maybe closer than some of the fears or worries or concerns? Probably, in the sense like one of your most practical worries or concerns would be, will I get a job in 8 months if you're one of these people? 8 months is a good amount of time now. Does that guarantee a job for everybody? No. But I think I would offer this. I have been watching them fairly closely for probably 6 years. And for the average person that may or may not stay as close to the ground, the proof's in the pudding is what I will say. It's like how the average citizen is a year from now. Like that's a big thing I personally care about. How they are in 2 years to 3 years from now, that's what I really care about. Like 12 months, I think you should see some really meaningful change. Like just for instance, the possibility of less income tax or no income tax, those types of things. I mean, those for the average family, that's like instantaneous relief. But that the team they have behind them, whatever they're saying on Facebook or X, the team behind them is so much deeper than they even are able to let on, that there's some real thought and energy behind every single policy decision. And despite all the politicization of the whole conversation, that these people truly care. That's one of my deep convictions. They truly care about America, not intellectually, but the average person walking around who does all the work and who does all the everything, right, that supports the entire economy, the little guy, so to speak. They're for the first time, there are people fighting for them, and not just with words, not just with hope, but actually have the ability to improve the average person's situation so that we're safer, we're more prosperous, and more stable. Even though on the front end that might look like threats to Canada and Mexico. What's he trying to do? He's trying to just get a better deal for America. How does he start? He starts with some extreme statement, right? It's like, what? That's crazy. The 51st state? That's crazy. Guess what just happened, though? A gigantic shift in the whole conversation just took place, so that the handful of minor changes that we actually need, done like that, right? So it requires a little bit of like insight to see it, understand
the art of the deal.
The art of the deal. But what I will say, just in general, is if anyone is like worried or concerned, and to do their best, take a deep breath, give it some time. If you're skeptical, what else can you do?
Yeah, and I would say do at least what I'm doing personally is effectively the same Doge thing for my own life. So if you, instead of getting worked up, I mean, people are getting so angry because they're scared.
Yeah.
Their secondary emotion is anger because they're scared of what might happen. And it's understandable. It's like we're in the Wild West right now as far as like this has never happened before.
Lots of change.
So fear is like, it's okay that you're feeling this fear, anxiety, or whatever. But let's zoom out and wait. And while we're waiting, how about we make use of our time?
Yeah.
So first of all, see what your skills are. See where your holes are personally. Like, do you deal with a lot of anxiety or depression or chronic pain or whatever? We're always talking about that, like trying to become the fullness of who God created you to be. So do a budget or an audit on yourself and with your wife if you have that situation, and look at the problems. And sometimes, like, I just had to like stop like $100 donation I've been doing to a person for like 3 years. Really, like, don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And a trip I had planned in 2 months, I just like canceled it. And it's just like, I thought that these were a yes. And now after everything's brought into the light, it's like, this is a tough choice, but I'm going to do this now. And we're just going to trust the Lord to bring that back in the future.
Yeah.
But you could do that to relationships.
Yeah.
Be like, this person is actually a drain, net negative on my life. And yes, I care about them, but maybe I do need to bring this to the Lord and surrender this person to the Lord. And just that's just one way. So that could be like, you could have, maybe you eat fast food too much, or you don't exercise at all, or whatever it is. There's a way to audit each area of your life and just invite the Lord in the meantime. So it's like, while the earth is shaking like this, if you're going to use the storm, instead of just get pissed all the time, because that is like literally like a teenager behavior. It's easy to do. It's easy to like, it's fine to have those emotions, but to stay there is childish.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help your family. It doesn't help your marriage. It doesn't help you at work. If you're going to like, what they're doing is demanding value from people now. That's what's like becoming add value or you lose value.
Yeah.
And so that's intense, but it's like, well, there are ways for you to add value. Audit your life. Look at yourself. Look at your marriage. Look at the holes. Invite the Lord in, and He'll work on them in a not overly daunting, intense way. But you get it all in the open and you say, well, I've got some problems here, here, and here. What do you want to work on next, Lord? And then at least in 8 months, you'll have improved a lot. Now suddenly you're more valuable at work because you've got more peace and more joy. You have encouragement to give other people instead of just complaining and bitching about everything all the time. Like, it's just, there's a lot that can be gained in this next 8 months if you can get, like, let the anger out at the beginning, frustration, whatever, and then take a deep breath and say, what are we going to do?
But that would cause me to look internally, Mick. That might be a little uncomfortable, Mick.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
it is
good.
uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I really appreciate what you said, and that I think it's going to be hard for a lot of people, honestly, if they're not, to be introspective instead of mad at the world, you know, like what I think that's one of the hardest things always is to say, what's my piece of this, no matter whether it's marriage, whether it's work, whatever, difficult situation, what can I own? Because ultimately in that is where you can grow.
Yeah.
And until you own that piece, you can sit there and complain about it all day long. It's not going to get better. It's passive. It's weak.
Yeah.
When you start to look at yourself, I think of the Dave Ramsey. He's like, oh, I got this. Do you? You know, like, let's hear what they have to say, and then compare it to, oh, gee, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. Would those be good things? Yeah. Is there anything keeping me from doing it? No. All right. I guess I'm going to do it. You know, that's good though.
Yeah. Just harness the emotions, the pain, or whatever, grieve, do whatever you need to do, but then you have to use this storm. If it's a storm in your life right now, and this is very difficult, it can be used for your benefit and your marriage and your overall quality of life if you decide to take this, like, the zoomed out wisdom approach to it instead of just the emotional wave of another article came out that I can be angry about. Oh, I've got some coworkers I can complain to about that. We're all going to agree how terrible this is. And then before you know it, the storm has passed and you're the same. And tons of other people took advantage of the storm and improved their character and their well-being. And those are the people that are going to be promoted in these 7 mountains and everything else, because they're going to add more value, because there's going to be a lot of people that are just complaining, angry, pissed, and they just harden their hearts towards the world and towards everything that's happening. And there's a lot of people that are going to be just promotable because they're full of joy in life and they can get the work done and they aren't a net negative to the culture.
Yeah.
So it's a very, like, important time. I would say if you're like not even middle manager, but just like a lower level in compared to where you want to be, like, what a time to work on your character. And then when, like, the dust settles, who are people going to want to hire unless you're like a culturally value add to that company, not just like the nuts and bolts, but character is going to get rewarded in this next season after the dust settles. Yeah.
As you're saying that, it made me think of this. We've had a recent case study with Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it. I think we could all imagine, like, what kind of excess or whatever you want to call it is in the government, let alone some little social media company. Like, it was a public company, like, fully accountable. Like, it's kind of what I was saying when it was just me owning. I have every incentive to save money, and Elon came in there, and I think it's like at least 80%, 80 to 90%, reduce the workforce in like 30 days, 60, like some stupid amount that you would say a Harvard business person would be like, that's probably not a good idea, right? You're going to shock that business. Lots of fear, lots of bad things could happen. And I'm not saying that's like a ideal or a cool thing, but he did that. He went in there and did that, and they actually got more productive. Like, with whatever was left, the 10 to 15% and whoever else they maybe hired. That's kind of a wild example, that recent example of what's just happened. I haven't done any case study, what happened to all the people that left and all this stuff. But you can imagine, that's the business side. That's the for-profit side. What is the governmental ratios? Again, the ratios, like, is it 90%? Is it 95%? We could literally do without. And actually the money we've been spending is actually creating negative value. That does remind me, the business I ran, it was like there were certain people we were spending a lot of money on that I thought we needed. And then out of pure necessity made some changes. And then like the culture like went better. I was like, I did not anticipate that. So if there is some major, I'd say, underlying encouragement to this whole thing is, whatever short-term bumps, what's the airline term, turbulence we all encounter, the sheer enormity of the amount of purchasing power, like an exercise like this unlocks, will lead to, you just dilute it across the entire populace, everyone's going to feel something meaningful. And I'm hopeful that it's like, instead of a 1% or a 2%, like, oh, someone somewhere else in some industry now makes my latte a little cheaper or something. I don't know. But like something more meaningful, like $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 of like tangible net benefit within 12 months. I'd say 12 months is pretty fast, but it's, and of course, eggs. Everyone's talking about eggs. I do think eventually eggs will come down. But that is another thing they're working on. Energy. Energy is the underlying input to everything else in the economy. What a novel idea, instead of just jacking up our borrowing costs to reduce the money supply, to actually reduce the main cost of the entire economy, which is oil and gas. Let's flood the supply, get that price where oil companies can still make a profit. But if you get gas under $2 or a gallon, now all of a sudden that really does impact your latte. Because I use this example a lot, but think of all the worker that had to drive there, all the food that had to be delivered there, and all the food that had to be, or all the other things that needed to be delivered to those people in order to produce it's a big deal. So the economist in me, the big picture person, is just like, my gosh, nothing like this has ever been attempted. We have some really strong case studies of how that can end well, and the exact same people that did that are the exact same people doing this. And just stay positive and be looking for where the fruit. That's what I'm waiting to see, how quickly the fruit gets out to average folks.
Cool. It's either going to work or it's not going to work.
Correct. We'll find out pretty fast.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, with that, we kind of weaved in a little bit of current events, what's going on with our country and the world, along with some really practical examples of what that can mean for us individually. I love Mick's words of just encouraging. I think this is true of anything, but specifically now, anytime there's a problem or issue where we can reflect what's our one piece of it, something we can change, because we can't ever improve our situation unless we do something different. So that's where a little bit of introspection comes in. What's the piece we can grow, learn, stay humble, stay grateful, and that's a great recipe for growth and ultimately to be in a better spot no matter what your goals are.
Amen.
Well, have a good one.